Hi, I'm Rick Stivers and welcome to Young Martin's Reels. Today we're going to be working on a Penn Levelmatic 940. And I actually went through this reel last night, shot the video. It didn't turn out very well, so I've decided to do it again. I'm not sure we're going to take the reel down quite as far as we did yesterday, but we'll see how it turns out. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is remove this handle, and the way we're going to do that, we've got a retainer screw right here that holds this screw in. Next we're going to remove this. Now I bought this handy tool thinking it would take care of all my pen needs, but it doesn't. It doesn't fit this. So in the end, we break down to the old prehistoric method of a pair of pliers, which be very careful not to damage the screw. Okay, note that this is a screw and not a nut. With that off, we take the handle off. Next we remove the tension washer. With those removed, we're going to take off the star drag nut. I'll unscrew that off of there. There we go. Set it off to the side. And that brings us down to these three screws to take this side cover off. Note that there are two different sizes of screw here. The large one screws into our reel seat. Okay, we're going to take the side cover off at that point. And we will remove the spool. And I did the same thing yesterday. I keep forgetting this. These are on here. These are brakes, and they fit right here on these posts, and they're very, very easy to fall off, and a whole lot harder for me to take these big fingers and put back on. But with a little perseverance, it can be done. All right, those brakes, when we go to put this back together, fit right inside this collar right here. And what happens is when you cast, those brakes spread out and they provide a little bit of drag inside there. Now with that done, we've got this side cover, and in this condition, if it were like this, I would never pull this apart. It's in very good condition. It's all been cleaned, but even if it were dirty, you should be able to take a cotton swab and clean up inside here, cleaning off excess grease or dirt or grime. Clean it off. Inspect these teeth on this gear. This large white gear here is going to mesh with this gear on the spool, and also as it meshes with that, it's going to turn this gear, see if you can see it, yeah, this gear right here, which turns a gear inside here, inside the side cover, that turns our worm gear. So when this is turning, notice that our line leveler on the worm gear is moving. Okay, what we are going to do is go ahead and take this side panel off. We're not going to completely dismantle this frame like I did yesterday, but I am going to show you how the pieces go in case you have taken one completely apart. You'll at least be able to get the idea of how to put it back together. It's a bit of a balancing act to get all the pieces to hold in place. Okay, again, you will notice there are three different sizes of screws. Notice these are not the same kind of screws as what are on the other side, so don't get them mixed up. The largest of the screws with the larger heads goes on the handle side, and the smaller of the three screws goes on this plate side. Now when you go to lift this up, first thing you want to do is take the clicker switch and put it in the upright position. Then lift out on the plate and maneuver the handle out of the side plate. With that done, you now have the frame exposed. Now I'm going to show you how this will come apart, but I'm not going to take it apart. Okay, the first thing you do is take your clicker assembly off over here. Then you come down to right here, and there's a small C-clip right here. Okay, you would pop that C-clip off, which would now allow you to take this gear off. Notice that gear is what turns the worm gear. Okay, at that point, you would go ahead and maneuver the carrier assembly over to the side so that you could unscrew the screw out of the bottom of it. Once you've done that, you would go ahead and remove the pawl. Now the way I remove the pawls is with a rare earth magnet, because it works so easy. I'll go ahead and do that real quick since it works so easy and it's so easy to put it back. Okay, you take the screw out. With that out, you can take your rare earth magnet, place it directly over the pawl, and it lifts it right out. Okay, with that out, now when you disassemble this, your carrier assembly would slide out off the end. But we are not going to take that off, because it took me 45 minutes to reassemble all of this yesterday. And I'm not going to go that route again today. So let's go ahead and put the pawl back in so that we don't lose it. Make sure once you've got the pawl out that you inspect it. Make sure it's not damaged. It's got a nice arc inside it, and that both sides of it are equal to each other. Then take the two teeth, line them up with the slots on the worm gear, turn the worm gear, and you'll see the pawl, the carrier slide up and down. Once you've got that, you know you're in the right position. Go ahead and screw your pawl screw back in. Once you've got it in position and know that it's where you want it to be and it's not hanging up, go ahead and tighten it down that last little bit. Alright, in the event that you wanted to disassemble this frame, which I did yesterday, but I don't intend to do it again today, if in the event that you want to take this apart, this nut right here and this stud right here, this stud screws into the reel seat here. This nut screws down over top of this post. With those off, now this assembly would slide directly off. If you've got that off, now all of this assembly comes out. And the only reason you'd ever want to do this is if you needed to really get inside here to clean out some corrosion or heavy grease or anything like that. But I recommend, if at all possible, leave all of this together at this point and try to clean and scrub that as best you can without taking it apart, because it is a nightmare trying to put it back together. In the event that you do take it apart, there is a bushing on this side, right inside, and there's a bushing on this side. This one you can see easily right here. Those two bushings fit on the ends of this. And there's also a notch on this end. See these two notches right here cut in the frame? Those two notches, well, there's two notches on this tube that slide into those two notches. So you would line those up with, don't forget to put the carrier on. So you would have the carrier on, line those up, put it all together, and then tighten your nuts back down. It is a balancing act that I don't intend to do again today. It's possible. I've done it. I did it yesterday, but it took me a lot longer than I ever really believed that it would. All right, at this point, we're ready to start assembly. Okay. This is your clicker assembly. This clicker right here rides on the gear on the opposite side of the spool. See this big tooth gear here? It rides on that gear. Okay, it slides on these two short posts. See, this is the gear side of your worm gear. These go on that side, facing with the handle towards the spool. Okay, with that in place, if you've cleaned this up and inspected it, now this screw, if you take this screw out right here, it will allow you to take these gears out. But there's no reason to do it that I can see except for changing out the gears. Once you've lubricated those gears and put a drop of oil right here on the bushing, you're ready to put this back together. By doing that, you take the clicker handle, slip it into the slot, wiggle a little bit, and it will maneuver around. Don't force it. Then bring it around. Before we get that far, let me show you. There's a stud right here. That stud is going to fit in this hole right here. Once you've done that, once you've got it all lined up, that should pop into that hole, and when it does, everything should be aligned in here. So let's align the clicker, slide it on, and then come around and get it lined up with the stud, and it snaps into the stud snaps into the hole. All right, you're ready to put those 3 screws back in. Remember, the larger of the 2 screws or 3 screws goes into the reel seat. The stud is spinning. Like, why isn't that tightening down? If you have to, hold the stud in place so that it can't, this one just sits in place. The only thing that holds it in place is this screw on the end and the other screw that goes in on the other end. So you may have to hold this one in place while you tighten it down. In the event that you did take this apart, there's a slot right here that the carrier rides in. You have to make sure that this carrier bail sits in that slot, and then you may have to come back and adjust this to get it to where it's in just the right place so that it doesn't bind as it's turning. Okay, everything on that side is tight. That brings us over to the business side. Now you have 4 screws on this side, and I took all this apart yesterday and installed new drag washers, but we're going to pop it back apart today. Okay, get those 4 screws out. This assembly drops out of the bottom. This switch plate over here will slide around. You'll have to realign it back when you want to put it back in. When we get to this side, you've got a collar. We take the collar off. We've got a tension washer here. Then we have a keyed washer. And normally you can just lift this off, the gear off, and all these will just slide out. But this tension washer was giving me a fit yesterday, so we're waiting on that. On the bottom of that is a drag washer. Now this will all come apart. All right. With that off, we can now pull the rest of it out. So now it assembles this way. Drag washer, keyed washer. Drag washer, keyed washer. Drag washer, keyed washer, drag washer. Tension washer. All right, the rest of this, hopefully you will not have to take apart because it doesn't like to go back together. In the event that you had to take this piece off right here, there's a pin right there. You drive that pin out, and that will then allow you to slide this off and be able to go inside here and clean it out. Again, this assembly, normally you can spray it, scrub it a little bit, and put it back together without having to take it apart. The way that you would have to take it completely apart is if it's got a heavy corrosion inside it. So we're not going to do that. Now we're ready to reassemble it. Go ahead and grease all this, which I did yesterday, but we'll add a little bit of grease just as an example of what we did. Okay, I'm greasing everything out, all the parties involved. I sprayed it down with a penetrant yesterday, which allowed me to go through there with a cotton swab and clean everything out of it. Once you got at that point, we're ready to put the gear on. If you take the gear and put you some grease along the teeth, put a little bit more grease on the teeth of the pinion gear. Let me turn that around so you can see it. This is your pinion gear in the center. This assembly that's holding it is the yoke. This is the jack plate over here. This assembly right here, as this turns, kicks the jack plate back, which allows it, when you push the button and wind the handle, it releases the jack plate or the yoke back and allows the pinion gear to fall back into place. Alright, we are going to slide this on. Okay, notice it's all the way down because it's even with the pinion gear. Now, if you try to rotate this after you've assembled it and try to get it to do so, see how this pinion gear falls over to the side? It's going to act like it's real loose and got stripped teeth. That's not the case. The spool holds that in line when it's all assembled, and so until you put it together, that's not going to function properly. Alright, next thing we're going to do, add a little grease to our drag washer. Slide it into place. Next comes this keyed washer. Notice that it's got this kind of an oval shape with the flat on each side. That fits in here on the mating up to the flats on the gear sleeve. Next comes another drag washer. Slide it on. Next comes the eared washer. Now it's got these little ears on it and everything's fitting down inside. That'd be the last one there, and that actually fits down inside. The next one's actually going to go above it. We're going to put a little grease on this drag washer. Slide it down. There we go. Make sure it fits flat. And this would be the last keyed washer. Now notice that it's actually fitting above the gear. That's okay. It's allowed to, because what it's locking to is this shaft and not the gear itself. Now all those are in place. We're going to add the tension washer right at the end. Right there. Now we're ready to put all of that back into the side case. If you need to, you can scrub this up. What I did yesterday was I sprayed it down with some penetrant, took a acid brush like this, scrubbed it all around, and then wiped it all out using cotton swabs to get off any of the excess grease that was inside. Once that was done, I re-greased it and set it up to go back in. One last thing to do is put a drop of oil right here in this bushing, because that bushing is what the spool is going to ride on. Now we'll slide all this back in. And notice that the switch up here at the top has got these pins that it has to slide on. There we go. See how they slide in? Let's see if I can make it work. Okay. There's a pin post here and there's a post here. This post has to fit into this slot and this post has to fit into this slot. Once they're in, if you hold this in place, you can flip the switch back and forth. And what that's doing, if you look inside here, it's moving the pinion gear up and down to make it engage and disengage the spool. All right, hold it all in place. We're going to turn it over and reinstall these 4 screws. Okay, now we've got that done. We are down to reassembling. Again, make sure that you put your drop of oil in your end bushing down here, right there. I did that yesterday, so I don't need to put another one in there today. We're going to slide this in, slide the spool in, And again, I've let that fall off. That's going to be my hardest thing, is keeping those weights in place. And then you've got to watch out for the spool. Just make sure that the line doesn't get trapped inside. Because if the line traps inside the spool in the case, it's going to bind up. There. Once it's in good, you should be able to pull it out a little bit, and you'll hear the clicker. If you've got the clicker engaged, turn the clicker off. It should turn out smoothly. Spin it back in, get the line back in. Okay, these weights are supposed to be put in dry, so otherwise I'd put a little dab of grease on it to slide it in there, but they're supposed to be put on dry, so I'm going to leave it dry and very gently put it back in place. Let's try needle nose pliers. If you do hold it with a pair of pliers, make sure not to crush it. It's just a little piece of plastic. There we go. Get those in place. Line the spool up so that it's level, so that they're not going to fall off. Make sure they're pushed all the way in. Now we're ready to reinstall the side plate. Line it up. Slip it in. There we go. Notice that you had a stud just like on the other side right here for that to go in. That stud is on this seat. The other one is the big screw that we took out. We're going to put that back in the plate. Okay. All right, now we take the sleeve, put the sleeve back in, reinstall the star drag knob. Now notice that it's got numbers on one side and no numbers on the other side. Well, go ahead and install it so that the number side is facing towards the spool. Okay, screw it down. Now you're ready to put on this last tension washer. And if the tension washer has been squished flat, you can go back and add just a little bit of curve to it with a pair of pliers. Don't put a lot of curve. You don't want to break the tension washer, but you can add just a little bit to it. There we go. Now we'll slip the handle on and we'll tighten the drag down some more so that the star nut goes down further. All right. With that in place, we're ready to put, it's time out. Let's clean this handle up just a little bit. I was so frustrated by the time I got to this point yesterday that I didn't clean the handle. All right, with that done, put the handle back on, put the screw back in the handle. Tighten it down as far as you can by hand. And then if you don't have the wonderful pin nut, go ahead and tighten it with a pair of pliers, but gently. You do not want to scar it. Okay, you're going to line this groove up, a slot up with that screw hole, which we've done. Okay, once you've got to that point, you can turn your clicker on to pull the line out. Go ahead and make sure that it locks back, which it does. Turn the clicker off. It flows beautifully. I got the drag set too tight. clicker back on. There's our drag. And all functions of the reel operate beautifully. And what I do to keep my line from getting all tangled up is I tie a loop onto the end of it, like so. And I take that loop and hook it on the back of the reel seat and go ahead and wind it in. That locks it in place. Now the line can't get away. And for storage, I made these little reel cases. We drop it into the reel case, pull the ends, there we go. And there we have the Penn Levelmatic 940 ready to go fishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, hit the like button. If you dislike it, go ahead and hit the dislike button. But please tell me what you didn't like about it. Maybe I can do something to make it better. If you would like to see more videos like this, please hit the subscribe button. Until then, I'll see you next time on Young Martin's Reels. As a bonus feature, I've decided to include the footage of yesterday when things went so disastrous, but it's going to be on about 50 speed fast forward. So for every 1 second you see there's going to be almost a minute. So you'll understand what it was like to try to take it apart and figure it all out, put it back together and get it figured out by taking that frame apart, so that you'll have an idea what's there. Thank you.